Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. Today's podcast is going to be a little different. For one, I'm going to be doing it by myself, and yes, I'm not going to be joined by our friend Leo. I decided to give him the day off. Actually, I'm saying this like I'm not going to send him the audio file after and be like, bro, like, please do the mix master. Yeah. So I do that stupid voice just to show that I'm like being funny. It doesn't really work. People don't laugh. Jokes aside, there's a bunch of things I could have spoken about today, but I'm gonna start off with this because it's been sitting on my head for a while. Right? It's a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and it's probably one of my favorite verses. It goes something like Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibramaha, smriti bhramshad buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. I might have messed up the pronunciation, a little bit of improvement necessary. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibramaha, smriti bhramshad buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. The literal meaning of this is about anger, and I think this is particularly useful for people in this situation. A lot of anger going about everywhere, particularly on the internet. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm not in the position to do so unless you come to me for advice, in which case you've literally asked me to tell you how to live your life, and so I will tell you how to live your life, right? Okay, I digress. The meaning of the verse. From anger comes clouding of judgment slash delusion. From delusion slash clouding of judgment comes the bewilderment of memory. The bewilderment of memory leads to the destruction of the intellect, and the destruction of the intellect leads to one's own destruction. Now, I don't know if I need to explain anything beyond that, dude. Honestly, it seems pretty self-explanatory. But just for the heck of it, since I need to pull this podcast longer and longer, I'm going to talk about this. The concept of being in control of your emotions is not, shall we say, unique to Stoicism. In the Bhagavad Gita, which, depending on whom you ask, came thousands of years earlier, this idea was found, right? So let's talk about Stoicism for a bit. They talk about, I believe, in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius and the other Stoic scholars, philosophers, talk about how the only thing that you can control is yourself. And you shouldn't worry about things that are beyond your control. Similar ideas are found throughout the Bhagavad Gita, which is technically the summary of the message found in the Upanishads, right? And the Vedas. On anger particularly, there's this concept called the Shadvairi, which is a similar concept is found in the Bible. They talk about the 7 deadly sins, whereas in the perspective of Vedanta, we talk about it as 6 deadly enemies. Shad means 6. Vairi probably means enemies, right? And among them, one is anger. And this particular verse deals with anger and how it leads to one's destruction. Now, I'm probably speaking about all of this because I've learned how to cope with my anger in a healthy manner, and I have to deal with people who do not. That's particularly annoying, I guess. This one thing that I've seen over and over and over again is this particular strange phenomenon, right? This person's angry about something that happened at work, so he comes back home. He or she they come back home and they yell at their spouse or the people at home, or and they just spread this cycle of negative emotions. I do not know what the point of this was, but yeah, dude, like essentially, I'm trying to say that misplaced anger can lead to destruction of the self. And it's not useful, particularly if you want to better yourself. You need to learn to process anger in a healthy manner, which is what I did. Now, since we've opened up that particular box, let's just go with it. Back in 2012 to 2015, I was learning how to be disagreeable. If I had to summarize my entire process of, and I'm actually thinking about making a video about this entire thing, my evolution through the years. So a decade ago, I was not in the same place as I was now, which is pretty cool because I think self-development is this really long journey of looking back at your past self and going, that guy was a fucking idiot, and going, fuck, mostly. At least that's what it is in my case. I aim to go to the next year and look back at the current me and say, damn, that guy was a moron. Fuck, he should learn how to do shit. Dumbass, you know? Yeah, it probably. I'm looking at my past self and laughing. This is not how I treat myself on a daily basis. I'm quite resolved with myself. Okay, so talking about 2012 to 2015, I was learning about a particular process of becoming disagreeable, but I wasn't doing it in the right manner. You could say that. I was being a little shit. I think Hamza talks about this in his videos. There's a particular character called Jeffrey where Jeffrey loves making other people uncomfortable, and doing that makes him feel powerful. And I think that is bang on. That was a bang on description of my mental state during those years. I'm not going to speak about what I was doing, but I will allude to it. And suffice it to say that I was not particularly stable in a manner of like, I didn't know how to process my emotions, and every little thing would just be me exploding. Now, thinking back, there's probably a lot of little breadcrumbs that I could follow throughout my childhood. And I'm actually literally doing that in my head as I'm talking, and I realize where all of this anger, so to speak, was coming from, at least at that point. The only way I've seen anger be expressed is in form of explosive expletives / abuse. So, being a partial product of my environment, I learned to pick up on that, and I began to process my anger the same way. Needless to say, this is not particularly healthy, and I'm not advocating this, but I am advocating finding an outlet, ideally a creative outlet where you can express yourself, right? So these days, what I've been doing when I rarely get angry. But when I do, I think it's because of this intense process of, I could make so many jokes, but since I don't have a live audience, I'm gonna refrain. What was that shit? Yeah, so this is like a live process of my brain. So the issue with having Leo and I there is that we both go off on tangents all the time, but whereas if it's just me, I go on like a series of tangents. At least over there, it's controlled chaos, sort of. Like we're trying to bounce off each of other's vibe and energy. But yeah, so like I was saying, learn to channel your aggression, your emotions. An ideal way to do that would be through some sort of a creative outlet. I've been journaling on and off for nearly 4 years. It's particularly picked up in the last couple of years, ever since COVID, but I've been learning how to express myself, and part of this might have been because of the constant shall we say, listening to podcasts that I indulge in. I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson's works, a lot of talks by Swami Sarvapriyananda, a lot of podcasts by Joe Rogan, recently Gad Sad, Rollo Tomasi. You will find a pattern there. Yes, very. No wonder, like, I'm accused of being right wing. But anyway, getting back to hand. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and eventually there was so much input, right? I was taking in so much. I had to do something, and on and on and on and on. I think I've heard Dr. Jordan Peterson go on about how it's necessary to learn how to think. And to do that, you need to be able to read, digest information, and to improve your ability to think, you need to be able to express yourself. And one of the best ways to get your thoughts in order is to write. And that's what I've been doing. Initially, it just started out. So if I look back at my journal I've been using the same journal, I've been using the spiral bound notebook since 2018, which should tell you a couple of things. One, I am committed to journaling, and two, I haven't particularly been initially at least, I haven't been particularly, shall we say, what's the word for it? God damn, this happens once in a while. Consistent with it, right? So when I first began, journaling was just, it was an equivalent of Dear Diary, today was the 8th of March, and today I did this, and this. So that was what I was doing initially, but as my habits changed, as I began to consume more productivity content, I realized that I could do other things with my journaling, and that was the evolution that I saw. Looking back at this one particular journal, it's insane to see how much I've developed. Now, the other bad habit that I had when it came to journaling, particularly, or just writing things, was that I would have 1,000 pieces of information scattered everywhere. And it took me a really long time. Like I've been saying, I've been on this productivity journey for nearly 4 years, and I'm probably gonna make a video about that. Self plug. And the coolest thing is to look back at your own progress. And that's phenomenal, right? So anyway, I got into talking about journaling because of how I was advocating that it was a particularly good way to channel your aggression, or express yourself, essentially. And you need to be able to express yourself. What I've seen mostly from my limited experience as a 28-year-old is that most disagreements are caused by emotional reactions, right? Somebody's ego is hurt, somebody's emotions are touched, someone's triggered, and they go off. And for some reason, I don't particularly understand why this sort of emotional outbursts are being, I don't know why these emotional outbursts are being condoned or celebrated. If we want to progress as a society, we will need to adapt more rationality. I'm not saying that we need to ignore our emotions. I just advocated for the past, I think, 5 minutes or so about how it's important to learn how to channel and to express oneself, particularly your emotions, right? So what happened was, eventually my journey led me from 2012 to 2015, maybe 2016. So what happened was 2015, I finished my undergraduation, I came out, and I calmed down to a large extent. I wasn't acting up as much, but there were issues, right? What happened after that was I realized that this didn't happen until 2016, when I found an outlet for most of my aggression. And I met a couple of shamans along the way who guided me on my journey. who essentially told me, dude, like, listen, shut the fuck up. This is not the right way to handle stuff. Maybe you could do this better. And I went back and, the message sunk into my subconscious, and I eventually found healthy ways to express and cope. Right? So, like I said, initially, when I wanted to express myself through express my anger, I would yell, grind my teeth, and probably just go off on somebody. And that's not particularly the best way, right? So essentially what happened in 2016 was I began to train martial arts. Since then I've been doing like Kung Fu and other things that I'm not going to mention. But what happened over there was that there was an outlet for my aggression. If I was mad, I learned techniques, because this was a particularly important thing that we learned while sparring. It was not to let our emotions, particularly anger, get a hold of ourselves, and about how it could be used as a boost of energy, but if we didn't use it right, we would just end up like a bull, see red, charge, and get our asses kicked. And that's happened. And that taught me, that forced me to learn how to manage my anger. And a huge part of that was through breathing. Right, so like I said, I met a couple of shamans who taught me that what I was doing was probably not right, and they pointed me in the correct directions. Of course, I had to walk. So back in 2016, somewhere around March or April, I don't particularly remember when, I took a trip to a place that I will not mention. I met a yogini, and I still remember this because I went for a couple of free classes that they were offering for yoga. At this point, I had already started martial arts training, but I was barely a couple of weeks or maybe a month into it. I went there and we were going through the Surya Namaskar, and towards the end, I believe I was lying down in Shavasana, and she realized that I was doing an opposite breathing kind of thing. Basically, I was breathing wrong. I wasn't doing the belly breathing. And essentially, okay, let me just describe this. So when you breathe in, your stomach is supposed to expand. And when you breathe out, it's supposed to naturally contract. This happens if you watch a baby sleep, you will be able to observe this process. They pretty much belly breathe all the time. This is really healthy for you. But somewhere along the line, we forget how to do this and we need to relearn or something like that. So what happened to me was my excessive anger literally fucked up the way I was breathing. Yeah. It fucked up the way I was breathing, leading. And if you don't breathe right in yoga, I believe they say that the breath is connected to the mind. And if you control your breath, you will be able to control your mind. And the asanas are pretty much for learning how to control your body, essentially. Ashtanga yoga has like 8 limbs of yoga. It starts with pratyahara, not pratyahara, shama, dhamma, pratyahara, all of that, and it goes all the way up to asana and pranayama come in between. I think they are the 3rd and 4th. After that comes pratyahara. I forget, my bad. But there are 8 steps, and towards the end, you progress from dhyana, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, right? So dharana is concentration, focusing your attention on a fixed point, which is quite difficult. Dhyana is meditation, which is difficult for me to describe, but easy for you to experience, right? I'm not particularly qualified to explain dhyana. Then there's samadhi, which Patanjali describes in a certain manner, and Shankaracharya describes in a certain manner. Yeah, so I got off on this digression because I went on this tangent because I was talking about the importance of breathing. And I wanted to mention who it was and the importance of yoga and all of that. Okay, anyway. So I spent like that particular session with that yogini, and I still remember her name, at least the meaning of her name, Full Moon, right? But after that, she tells me that I've been breathing wrong and I needed to fix that because if I didn't, my energy would be stuck in the first two chakras and wouldn't be able to progress. And thinking back, right, a lot of things make sense about her diagnosis. And this was like the third person that I met that really helped me on my journey to getting my shit together. So this was my process. This is where my journey of improving myself really began. Somewhere in 2016, I guess. Yeah. Because I spent 2015 just doing jack shit, man. Getting my shit together. But I did do a lot of dream research and stuff. I suppose that could be useful eventually. But my real improvement began in 2016. Probably at that particular moment, meeting these three shamans, of which Full Moon was the third. Right? After that, I had to get back to my town and learn how to breathe. I met a local yoga teacher. I'm not going to mention this, and if I do, my town is known for yoga. A lot of people come here to learn. A lot of people from abroad, they come here, they learn it, and they leave. They steal my culture and they go back to their country and they sell it for thousands of dollars. You think that's a half joke. That's a half joke. There's a thing that I would like to talk about, but now is not the moment because I haven't gone into the details. There's this book by Rajiv Malhotra that talks about this. Pretty much everything is a U-turn. They take things from India, they export it to the West, and they re-export it to India, packaged as something else. So things like vrata is like a vow that you observe. So most vratas involve food because control of food is like a little way you can use to showcase your, shall we say, ability to make decisions and stick to them. I don't get the exact word. This happens sometimes, right? Your commitment. So that, and part of that is fasting, and that was transported to the West and came back to India as intermittent fasting. We had Dhyana, which has a really long documented history, including the Bhagavad Gita, including the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, all the way up to the Vedas and the Upanishads. But it went to the West and it came back as what? Mindfulness. Yes, so I have a few gripes about this, but I'm not going to talk about this because I haven't read the book. And I will save it for later. Okay? Moving on. I had to spend time with a yoga teacher, learn to fix my breathing. And I know that at that particular time, this verse is very applicable. I was deluded. I was reacting. Oh, I'm really sorry about the freaking noise, man. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's construction happening right next to my house. And it's annoying. Yeah. So, yeah, dude, because I was pretty much angry all the time. I was the little angry young man. At that time, I was reading a lot of Karl Marx and communism and I was quite anti-establishment and stuff. Very left-leaning at that point. Things have changed. A lot of reading has happened since then. I will probably do like a reading of Das Kapital at one point, just to see what was so attractive at that point. Anyway, yeah, Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha. That happened, dude. My anger clouded my judgment. It literally destroyed my ability to breathe. A lot of those times are cloudy patches. I have a really good memory. Even if I do say so myself, I do. The cool thing is, I can remember which parts of my life are kind of patchy, hazy. And those years when I started getting outraged at pretty much everything, when I was on my path to becoming a social justice warrior, which is, incidentally, I was like a bit of a trendsetter. Pat myself on the back. I spoke about things like the pandemic or coming pandemic and world wars and all that back in 2015. And I know a lot of people who have probably known me since then thinking back to, oh shit, like, that flashback people get, a bad memory that they don't quite want to acknowledge. Like the pandemic starts in my memory. Dude, the human race is going to be destroyed. There's going to be pandemics. There's going to be a lot of wars. We're not in for a good time. And I was speaking about this kind of stuff in 2015. Now, since then, I've learned stuff, but again, I digress. So, yes, anger. Learn how to channel it. Learn how to express yourself emotionally, ideally through some sort of a creative outlet. I would recommend journaling. If you're musically inclined, definitely write songs. If you are more into movement, channel that aggression, do some aggressive movements, box, fight, shadow box, stuff like that. My initial plan was to do this. I was going to talk about these couple of books that I had read. Okay, and the difference... Actually, I reread two books. Okay, and I had read these books back when I was in school. So this was 2004, which was 18 years ago. 18 to 14 years ago. God damn, I am old. I can say 18 years ago. I'm not having a midlife crisis on podcast. Chill. It was just a realization that things are moving fast. Time moves unstoppably. The inexorable marching of time will lead to the destruction of the universe. Stop. Okay. Yeah, two books that I had read. So recently, I started reading this book called The Keys to the Kingdom series. It was written by Garth Nix. I started reading it in 2004. I read Mr. Monday and Grim Tuesday back then. I think I got Drowned Wednesday sometime when I was I was 9 years old when I read the first couple of books. I was probably around 13 when I got the third. I read Sir Thursday Out of Order in 2007. I read Drowned Wednesday in 2008. I got Lady Friday sometime when I got into university. So there's a huge gap, right? I got into university like 10 years ago. I passed out 7 years ago, right? So essentially, these are memories spanning nearly 2004 to 2012, 8 years. And when I first read the Garth Nix Keys to the Kingdom series, I was in the intended age group for that series, and the entire thing was pretty cool, right? I thought the world building was pretty neat, and the story was building up really well. There seemed to be a decent amount of lore. But when I reread it recently, I mean, I read the books continuously. I think I finished the entire series. Wait, let me just get my journal and... Yeah, so as a part of reading more this year, I've decided to track what kind of books I'm reading. I think it would be more beneficial to track what books I intend to read as well, but I haven't done that yet. I just have a bunch of books and then I pick one and I start reading it. Okay, so I started reading Mr. Monday on the 14th of February, right? And by the 16th... No, yeah. So 14th of February, I finished Mr. Monday. That day I finished Grim Tuesday as well. Drowned Wednesday, Sir Thursday, Lady Friday, Superior Saturday and Lord Sunday were finished on the 15th. I speedran those books, dude. To be fair, I had read these books before. The only books that I hadn't read at that point were Superior Saturday and Lord Sunday. the book details of Lady Friday were a bit hazy. So Thursday even more so. But Mr. Monday, Grim Tuesday, and Round Wednesday I had reread recently. I think sometime around 2015 because I had those books in my library, right? And so what I found when I did reread these books was that this marked difference in the way I perceived it. Now, to be fair, these books are for young adults, kids essentially, but there's this other series that I've read called the Percy Jackson series. Initially, it was Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and then it became the Lost. No, what? I forget the second series, and I think there's a third one with Magnus Chase and the Trials of Apollo and all of that. Right. So this is something I've been reading pretty much since 2008. And I can still read those books, and I still appreciate Rick Riordan for. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Mr. Rick, I still appreciate his writing. It's pretty cool. I like the story. It's fun to read. The lore is insane, chef's kiss, honestly. And he's connected all of the stories. I still read Percy Jackson. I get shit from it from people who don't read it, who haven't read it, and probably haven't read books. But I enjoy it and I read it, okay? Comparing the two, even though the target demographic is literally pretty much the same, Percy Jackson does so much better, right? Now, I'll probably have to reread all the Percy Jackson books, which I would love to do and talk about it in a later podcast episode. Probably at that time joined by Leo. But, okay, so the reason I brought this up is to showcase how certain books, how age, how time changed the way I view things, right? So when I first read the Keys to the Kingdom series, I loved it. The ending was cool. I finished it recently. It was good. But I realized now that I've read better books. And that's okay. But by contrast, I also want to add that I reread The Alchemist, right? And that was the most recent book that I had read. I finished that book on the 1st of March. I started reading How to Ikigai on the 20. I finished reading How to Ikigai. It took me a really long time, 13 days to finish the entire book, but I got a lot of decent details. And I started. Oh, by the way, just to go off on another tangent, I've started writing book reviews as a way to condense what I have read and to remember it, right? I've started writing book reviews. As soon as I'm done with the book, I write down whatever I remember, how much it touched me, or like what parts were really cool, and if I can adapt everything. Essentially, I'm breaking up my reading habit into reading fiction every once in a while and then reading non-fiction, right? Because reading non-fiction takes effort, and I'm only just learning how to read non-fiction in books that are technical, learning to take notes and highlight and stuff like that. It's a long process. I have already decided that I'm going to be a lifelong learner. And one of my goals is to look, like I've mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, is to look back at the last year version of myself and go, hey, that guy was an idiot, right? So that's part of the reason I started to read more this year. The other idea was to expose myself to a lot of ideas and words, among other things. It started out really cool. I remember. So how all of this started was really funny. I watched The Witcher series 2, right? I'm not gonna go on a rant about how bad it was. I watched The Witcher series, season 1, season 2. Season 1 was last year whenever it came out, and season 2, as soon as it came out, I watched pretty much everything in a week, right? But suffice it to say that it left a really bitter aftertaste. I was like, this this doesn't seem to be written in the same way or the same vein as season 1. And funnily enough, my I don't know how a lot of people think the same thing, right? So I went to Rotten Tomatoes and I checked out the scores, right? For the first season, the audience loved it. The critics hated it. I mean, it was like a 60 something percent to a 90 something percent. Critics 60 and the audience 90, right? And it was reversed for season 2. This, having watched it, had left this really bad taste in my mouth, and I was wondering what can I do, and I realized I could read the books. And I ended up reading the entire thing. I started reading The Sword of Destiny. I finished reading The Sword of Destiny on the 2nd of April, and I pretty much read like a book a day since then. I finished the entire season. No, not a book a day, but I finished there were 7 books. Sword of Destiny, Blood of Elves, Time of Contempt, Baptism of Fire, Tar of the Swallow, Lady of the Lake, and The Season of Storms. I finished all of these by the 18th of January. And that sort of set the tone for my journey forward, like reading books, right? So I read nearly 7 books in January. I read 10 books in February. Or 10 books, yes, but 7 of them were read pretty much in 2 days, and they were non-fiction. Anyway, yeah, moving on. The reason I brought that up was that set the tone for my reading habit. So since I was reading anyway, and like I said, listening to a lot of podcasts, one of the things that I heard from the Naval Ravikant's podcast, I think it was from the How to Get Rich podcast series. It's this 4-hour podcast that condenses all of Naval's tweet storms in one nice package. One of the things that he mentioned over there was read what you love until you love to read. So, and he also mentioned, balance it out. Read books that you enjoy, or read non-fiction once in a while just to get into essentially. So this is not what he exactly said. Those other things that I said were little quotes of his. This is me trying to explain what I've been doing and how I've understood that. So I've been balancing my reading of fiction and non-fiction as a way to balance reading what I love and reading trying to learn to love the reading process. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Give me a second. Let me just get some water. I've been going on for the last 38 minutes. God damn. I'm going to stop it at 45. There's only so much that I can listen to my own voice off. Damn, that's good. Really hits the spot. Okay, moving on. If you can't tell by now from my blocked nose and sort of deeper voice, I've got a bit of a cold. But I'm fine. I'm getting over it. Right. So this entire thing was to talk about how important it is to cultivate a reading habit. And one of the ways that you can, and I'm proving that you can do that, is by reading more of what you like. And every once in a while slipping in something that takes in a little more effort, then going back to what you like. And eventually get to a point where reading non-fiction becomes easy. And that's the goal. So the entire thing about why I brought this up was because I was reading The Alchemist. Rereading The Alchemist. I think I read this book sometime in 2008. Between 2008 and 2010 at any rate. I'm not particularly sure. Let me just check when this book came out. Release date. Let me check. Oh, it was published in 1988. Fine. It appeared in one of the scholastic fairs in my school, which was when one of my friends picked it up, and I was the guy who would go around reading everybody's books. So I ended up reading The Alchemist. Okay? What's pertinent to the conversation is I don't think it's fair to compare the two, right? But I'm gonna do it nevertheless, right? Because I was pretty much in the same age range when I read these books. I think I read Sir Thursday and Drowned Wednesday around that time, yeah? Around the same time that I read The Alchemist. Now, back then I wasn't as philosophically inclined, shall we say, as I am now. But what happened was when I reread this book, every single page there was this wisdom that just I read this book on Shivratri. I read the entire book on Shivratri. I decided to stay up the entire night, and I read The Alchemist then, right? So I'm gonna read out an excerpt of what I had written. This is actually my second time reading this book. The first time I read it was nearly 10 plus years ago. At that time, all I read was a nice, heartwarming story about a young man taking a risk, finding treasure and love by following his dreams. I had the summary down, right? I mean, if you had to summarize The Alchemist, it's still the same thing. But when I read it this time, it was different. And getting back. And I suppose that is because, and I'm going to read out the quote which literally comes in my journal. When you change your way of looking at things, the things you are looking at change. When I read that book for the second time and reflected why I saw so much in that book, I realized this. I realized it was because of this. I had changed a lot. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Hermeticism, the Kabbalah, and all of that, right? So, I've been dabbling in a wide range of philosophies. One of the things that I read was about the Hermetic tradition and alchemy, which is, I don't know if you could tell, but this book is kind of written about alchemy because it's about the alchemist, right? And in my readings of like things like the Hermetic philosophies, I think it was about the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which incidentally I have a copy of, not the original. I don't have the Emerald. Sorry. You might not have heard my voice because I was moving around trying to get the book to sit on my thing. So, the entirety of the Hermetic philosophy is derived from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Okay? Thoth was this godlike figure. They call him the God King, Trismegistus. He's also known as Hermes Trismegistus. Sorcerer God King of Egypt. There's a lot of myths associated with him, but essentially there's supposed to be this emerald tablet that contains all of life's mysteries, and it's supposed to be so simple. And they talk about that in this book, right? I'm going to talk about my understanding of alchemy, dude. Now, what most people think about when they talk about alchemy is discovering, literally, it's about the philosopher's stone. You get the philosopher's stone, you get the elixir of immortality, and you get the elixir of immortality and the ability to turn lead or pretty much any matter into gold. Now, I'm not going to talk about the immortality bit, though I could. Shrunvantu Vishwa Amritasya Putra. That's a line from the Vedas. It literally means, listen, O children of immortality. I just thought it was, kind of. I saw the opportunity and I took it, man. Anyway, the idea of immortality is different. It's not about, at least the way I've understood it, and it's very. And my idea of immortality comes from the Vedas and Advaita Vedanta. So I'm not going to talk about it here. But I will talk about this transmutation, the transformation of lead to gold, right? Remember when I spoke about like the beginning of my self-improvement journey? It was sometime in 2016 after I met like literally three shamans who guided me on the next steps that I had to take. After I got back, I got a few copies of the Kabbalah and the Hermetic. I read about the Hermetic philosophy and about alchemy. That was the building blocks to what I was doing. I was studying mysticism. I was studying spirituality, and I suppose somewhere there, this thing stuck, right? This idea stuck that true transformation, true transmutation wasn't about the gross. It wasn't about literally transmuting lead to gold. And they talk about it in The Alchemist as well, right? It wasn't about that. It was about this inner transformation. That you're born. So they consider lead this really base metal. Nobody wants lead. They would much prefer gold. Gold is a lot more valuable. It has a lot more uses. You can use it for so many things. And it's, gold, dude. Sona, that yellow metal, the thing that has driven men to kill each other for thousands of years in order to accumulate it. An interesting story about that, which I'm not going to mention. What the hell. So there's this, I think in the Uttarakanda of the Mahabharata, towards the end of the Mahabharata, there's this king called Parikshit who is cursed by a sage's son for humiliating a rishi. And I don't know if I'm remembering this right, because I made a joke about this with a friend somewhere in 2014. I think it was King Parikshit. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, give me a second. Yeah, so it was King Parikshit. I believe he was the great grandson of Sri Krishna. No, not Sri Krishna, of Arjuna. Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu's son was... Who was Abhimanyu's son? Was it Parikshit? I forget. Okay. Okay, Parikshit. I forget his lineage, but he is part of the Kauravas. He's part of the Kaurava clan. He's related to Arjuna. Probably Arjuna's and Krishna's great grandson or great grandson. I forget the specifics. But essentially, the idea goes that once the Mahabharata was done and Bhagavan Shri Krishna passes away, he sheds his mortal coils and returns to the heavens. Evil began to spread. Now there's this concept of the Chatur Yugas in Vedanta, not in Vedanta, but in the Vedas and the Puranas. The idea that the grand cycle of time is divided into 4 yugas, 4 epochs of time. Satya Yuga, which Satya means truth, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So Satya is when, you can literally take it as, it's described as a euphemism for the amount of goodness. Satya Yuga has 100%. The amount of goodness declines to 75% in Treta Yuga. When it comes down to the Dvapara Yuga, it's 50% good and 50% evil. And when you come to the Kali Yuga, 25% good and 75% evil. As in, they talk about how Dharma, which is personified as a cow, has lost 3 of its limbs, which represent... Dharma is standing on one limb called truth. Yeah, so that's the exact context. Dharma, which is personified as a cow, is being beaten by Kali, and that cow is standing on one leg, which is truth. The other three legs symbolize the degradation of the earth. I will get back. I will talk about this in a future thing. But essentially, Kali, that is, so this age is called Kali Yuga, and I think this is also found in the Srimad Bhagavatam towards the end, because this is when they start, when Parikshit is supposed to die, he starts learning about the life of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Yeah, I think this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which, so the timing is weird, okay? This chronologically happens after the Mahabharata, because it talks about Krishna's and Arjuna's descendant, Parikshit, King Parikshit. But during this, there's like they learn. So I'm getting to that. So Parikshit encounters Kali, and Kali is unable to make any headway in Parikshit's kingdom because Parikshit is such a righteous king. So what he does is Kali requests Parikshit that, hey dude, listen, this is my titular epoch. I need to spread havoc among the minds of men and women. Allow me a place from where I can exert my influence. And Parikshit being a king, so back in the day when kings were asked a boon, they were not allowed to say no. Righteous kings, at any rate. This is a Vedic perspective. So Parikshit permits Kali to enter the kingdom on a few conditions. He can't hurt innocent people and he will not be omnipresent. Okay? So he permits Kali to stay in places where there's gambling, where there's alcohol, prostitution, or immoral relationships between man and woman. And also wherever things are violent and slaughterhouses, things like this, right? So he permitted him to stay in these kind of areas. Now, Kali requests Parikshit to give him another place because all of these areas were unclean. And Parikshit decides that, hey, you know what? You can also stay in gold. And now this has an unintended consequence where Parikshit wears his crown, which is made of gold, and he goes to a hermitage, thirsty, and he asks a sage for water. He asks a sage for water, but he was deep in meditation. The sage was deep in meditation. Parikshit grows in, ego. He's like, oh, I'm the king. I've entered your thing. You can't greet me. I'm your guest and all of that. There's a bunch of things that make sense when you're culturally raised here. Atithi Devo Bhava means a guest is God. And as Parikshit has entered the ashrama looking for refuge, he is literally the Atithi, he is the guest, and he should be treated with respect. But the Rishi was in Samadhi. So this dude got angry and he assumed that the sage was pretending. He found a dead snake, so he takes it and he hangs it around the neck of the sage. When the son of the sage, I believe the sage's name was Shamika, and the son of the sage was Shringi. He comes there, he sees a dead snake on his father's neck, he removes it, he gets mad, he meditates, he finds out who's done this, and in anger, he curses Parikshit that he will die in 7 days being bitten by a snake. Post this, when this happens, when he hears about the curse, he gives up his throne, he goes to the Ganga, and he abandons food, water, and all sensual pleasures. And he abandons all sensual pleasures, and he feels that this is the thing. So essentially, he wanted to get moksha, but no one could assure him moksha. So finally, there was this Sukadev, who is the son of Vyasa, who is also related to the entire Mahabharata. And Sukadev goes there and they perform a yagna, and I believe he narrates the story of Sri Krishna, which becomes which is the Bhagavata Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of spiritual significance in this story, but essentially that was like a thing about like the evils of gold, because I made a joke about it and I want to talk about it. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to spirituality and the significance of the transmutation. Hermeticism doesn't talk about the physical, and alchemy. Hermeticism and alchemy doesn't talk about the physical transmutation of lead to gold. It talks about the evolution of of a person's character from lead to gold. You evolve, you transmute from the base to that which is desired, to the good thing. And that is signified through the physical transmutation of lead to gold. Now, I don't know if there exists an alchemical technique for this transmutation to occur in real life, but I've taken what is important to me, right? The bit that speaks to me here is to be in a constant state of self improvement. And this probably, among other things, planted this seed deep in my mind that it was good to improve oneself. And, certain activities of mine probably kept giving it water, and eventually it sprouted. And now, here I am, 6 years later. Incidentally, I had thought that my true journey to self improvement began 4 years ago, but looking back in the process of telling you this story, I realized that it began much earlier than that. So, yeah, this was a bit of a learning journey for me too. Oh, it looks like I've gone on for long enough. I've essentially done a 1 hour podcast by myself, close to an hour podcast by myself, which is really cool. That should tell you how much I love hearing the sound of my own voice. So, takeaways. A couple of things that I spoke about. It kind of didn't particularly wrap together. Maybe if you gave me another couple of hours, I could walk around, or I could beat around the bush. I'm kidding. I could probably, if I took more time, I could probably tie the entire thing together. But I think I should do a summary of the entire thing and just wrap it up. Okay, so I began by talking about anger. How is it related to self-improvement? How is it related to the end, right? This is not a bit of a stretch. One of the obstacles to this transmutation is anger, the Shadvairis. And this transmutation is essentially knowing about oneself, right? So, by knowing thyself, know thyself, right? This is the maxim. Becoming angry causes you to forget, essentially. And that's what leads to delusion and the rest. It's one of the obstacles to you realizing who you really are. And I'm not going to talk about that on the podcast. It's not a topic to be discussed on such a platform. Ideally, those kind of conversations are done face to face between a teacher and a student. And I don't know if I can assume that position and lecture you on that. But all I can talk about are my own experiences at this point. Despite the fact that I'm a student of quite a few disciplines and I've learned quite a bit, I still remain a student. I don't know if it's time for me to take up the mantle and teach. I will if people ask, and people have been asking. And you know what? If it happens, it happens. So, yeah, it's not cool to get angry. It will bring about blockages in your growth, in your spiritual growth. It will bring about, even if you're inclined just to the physical aspect of it, it will cause you health issues, man. Learn to channel your anger, learn to channel your aggression, work on yourself, get better at whatever it is that you like to do. get better at whatever it is that you want to do, work towards a goal, and realize it. And just remember that sometimes even the most benevolent of actions can have extremely unintended malefic consequences. I don't know why I said that. But yeah. So anyway, if you liked the podcast, leave a like. Let me know what you think about what I spoke about in today's episode. It's very chaotic. I will accept that. It's extremely chaotic. I didn't have a person to keep me in mind, but this is essentially how my mind works. This is me talking to a mic without a plan. And I kind of think it kind of all fit together towards the end over there. So thank you for joining me on the We Are Not Lonely podcast. We are out every Friday. We put out an episode about every Friday. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, leave a like. If you don't like it, leave a dislike. I will install the extension to see the dislikes. Let me know what you think. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.